to Dad is, everyone, knew Dad as Pastor Wilhite. But, I'd like to just give you a little idea of what it was like to be a son.
Go ahead, son.
And to hear, Dad give us, certain instructions all the time. And, being around a long time, Dad had a lot of things that he said that we can remember. And I'm sure, with your own fathers, after a while, some things, they just come out a lot. So one of the things he talked about was money. And he always said, there's two things you never wanted to pay full price for. And that was a house and a car.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't take his advice because I remember the first time I bought a car, I paid way too much.
Yeah.
And so, I kept trying to get it right. The other thing that he talked about was you have to make a decision and stick with it. And so, of course, I didn't take his advice that time either. So I remember getting a scholarship to a boarding school. And, one thing about Dad is, he would talk to you. He was a great listener, but when he would talk to you, he talked to you just like I'm talking now. He wasn't a yeller or a screamer. And so I had to go in, you had to make your case with Dad. So he wasn't in favor of me going to boarding school. So I had to make my argument. So I begged and said, and he finally gave in. But the first day I got there, I hated that school.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so I wanted to come back, And so I talked to him about it, and the first thing he shook his head, and there was no way he was going to let me come back. I had to live with my decision. And so, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to change his mind, I decided that I would try to find a way to just not be invited back to the school. And so I succeeded in that. But Dad had another plan when I got home. So that summer, Dad had a lot of chores to do around the house.
Oh, God.
I had to get a job. I had to do everything. And so when it turned out, I got lucky again, and another school offered me a scholarship. But this time, I took his advice. All right. And I hung in there and I stuck it out. Yeah. And so I'm glad I did. And there was just another thing, and those of you who knew Dad, he loved baseball. Yeah. And he had a couple of rules about baseball. And he had a couple of rules about playing sports. And one of his rules was you had to hustle in and you had to hustle out all the time. But you also had to remember the Lord. Yeah. And so we would play all of our games, but the first thing we had to do, if we had a game on Sunday, we had to go to church.
Yeah.
And so we would have to wear our uniforms to church.
Yeah.
And so we came in, we would have on our baseball uniforms, and Mike was the superintendent, and Mike, would be in his uniform at church, and everybody would wonder we carrying our spikes in, But, I remember that time, but the one thing that he did do was that we would go to church, but a lot of times after service, what he would do is late at night, he would always take us after church to play baseball. So we would be out, at the Infirmary Park. We would be out late at night, and Dad would be out there, hitting fly balls to us. you know, hitting grounders, teaching us the fundamentals, you know. And so, you know, I'll never forget that. And another thing that he taught us all was to share. You know? And he not only just talked about sharing, but he talked about, he liked to show you by doing. And so we would always go to McDonald's. And, you know, all my brothers and my sister, he would take us and he would buy one McDonald's hamburger.
Oh, man. Oh, cool. Preacher. Preacher.
One.
So he would cut that hamburger into so many different pieces. And then we had a soda. And so when he would cut the hamburger, and then he would have the soda. And then he would only buy one soda, but we all had to share the soda. So what he would do, he would give one of us the soda. And the one person that would pour the soda was Mike. But Mike always would pour himself more. So what he would do was, after all the soda was poured, he would make Mike give the soda that he poured himself to the one who had the least. And that was his way of teaching us to share and to work together. And then the last thing I want to tell you is that, you know, when Dad, you know, got sick, you know, we had the fortune of going out to see him, you know, every day, and he had gotten really sick and he couldn't talk much, but he always had words of wisdom for you. It seemed like Dad got smarter and smarter as time went on.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will remember is he told us, Sherry and I would go out, and one night, you know, we had been going out and he just hadn't gotten up, and people were leaving notes and messages. And so one night we got there and we were going to put a chicken on, and so he finally said, so we finally said, no, we're going to put it on, we'll just go out and see him. Well, that night, Dad was full of energy, and he talked to us for 2 hours. And I remember the things that he said, and one of the things that I remember him saying, you know, in his final days was, he said, enjoy the middle. And, you know, he breaks it out and he said, you know, you have your beginning of life, you have your middle of life,
Yeah.
and you have your end of life.
Yeah.
And he said, son, you're in the middle of life. And he said, enjoy your middle. He said, you know, I've lived that middle and I have no regrets. Yeah. You know, he said, but I'm at the end of my life now.
Yeah, Lord.
He said, but there's a lot of things that I thought were important that are not that important. He said, but just remember to enjoy your middle. And I just want to tell Dad, I'm going to enjoy it.